Shane Dawson recently joined Perez Hilton for a juicy interview where they spilled the tea about everything you've been wanting to know. Shane discussed what life has been like since getting cancelled twice. Shane also opened up about his mental health struggles, his relationship, his investments, career path, and more. Most importantly, he discussed his healing journey after being cancelled. Apparently, Shane is also grateful that he got cancelled, which is rather strange if you think about it. So first of all, on this podcast, Shane exposed what it was like living in LA and how he was really scared when he got cancelled back in 2020 because of the shit that was going down, and apparently he was getting some hard out death threats. So let's briefly explain Shane's cancellation for those who've forgotten. Shane Dawson's downfall in 2020 was a long time coming. Although he was once worshipped by millions of fans on YouTube, when his past resurfaced online and older content got exposed, this was something a lot of fans couldn't look past. In June 2020, Shane was officially held accountable for his past actions. A video of Shane making inappropriate gestures to a poster of then 11-year-old Willow Smith broke the internet. This prompted millions of people to slam him before Willow's family called him out on social media. As more and more disturbing content started coming to light, Shane quickly raced to Twitter to apologise for his past actions. He then posted a video a few months later returning to YouTube apologising for his scandals. After staying away from YouTube for almost a year, Shane announced in June 2021 that he would be returning to the platform. Shane officially returned to YouTube on October 7th, 2021 with a video titled The Haunting of Shane Dawson, in which he mentioned his infamous cancellation. There was a lot of other shit that went down, but basically Shane was cancelled for past videos he'd made. So Perez Hilton's latest interview with Shane is super saucy, and everyone wants to hear about all the drama that took place a couple of years ago. Well, you best believe Shane spilled the tea. Firstly, Shane said that he was in therapy before he even got cancelled because he had fears of being cancelled. And then when he did end up getting cancelled, this of course was Shane's biggest fear, and it was quite a mind-boggling time for him because for so long he was constantly chasing views and getting scared of being cancelled. But fast forward to now, he's far more chill about posting videos, and he posts content he likes now rather than caring about the views, and he's much happier for that. Shane had explained in the interview that he knows there's always going to be people out there that hate him, but he's much more accepting of the fact that he can't please everyone now. Perez Hilton then talked about his problematic past and brought to light how many similarities they've had with their pasts. Shane said a decade ago, everyone he knew loved his bad behaviour, and so he kept doing it, and he was getting lots of views and likes for all the content that he was posting. The pair both talked about how no matter what they do, no matter if they try and erase their pasts, it will always be there, and they just have to learn to accept that, apologise, but not continue to beat themselves up about stuff that's happened in the past. Shane said that for ages he was trying to control how other people thought of him, and he realises now that that's a very warped way to think. He recognised that he had this almost mediator role when filming documentaries, trying to ensure that there was some sort of positive, happy ending to these crazy scandals that were going on with all these influencers that he was filming. Perez tried to explain the psychology behind Shane's cancellation and brought up how even though he's got less views now, all his current viewers love him, and Shane genuinely enjoys making content that he's currently making. And the positive side to all this is that he's got no more burnout. He even has his own conspiracy podcast, and Shane has always been huge on conspiracies. That's his favourite type of content to create. Something I found interesting was that Shane never mentioned Trisha Paytas in this podcast because she was like his BFF and stood by him through all these controversies and cancellations in the past and vice versa, and Shane had stood by Trisha's side through everything, and of course we know that Trisha backstabbed Shane.
I don't even know who this person is, and he's actually the fakest person, and this just proves it.
And that's why they're no longer friends now. So I found that very juicy that he didn't mention her, and it's interesting that they're both starting families now, but they've gone their separate ways, which is kind of bittersweet because I guess in a fairy tale world their kids may have grown up together if they were still besties. But yeah, Shane didn't mention Trisha at all in this podcast, nor did he really mention many other influencers he used to be tight with, but he did briefly mention Jeffree Star towards the end of the podcast. Shane explained how he used to be involved in influencers' lives for months when he was doing documentaries of them, and so that's why he felt rather burnt out, because although he did have someone helping him, he was like a control freak and he liked to edit everything himself and do it all himself, and so it was very much real life for him, and in turn that became very draining for him. He mentioned that he was stuck in everyone's narratives, and he's also an empath. He said that before in the past, so I guess he would have wanted those influencers he was filming to be broadcasted in a positive light, even if everyone hated them and they were getting shit on for things that they'd done. Something else that people have been going off at Shane about for ages was his engagement to Ryland. So throwback to a few years ago, there was quite a bit of drama surrounding Shane and Ryland's engagement, because from a fan's perspective, it looked as if Shane was trying to avoid getting cancelled by shifting attention to a massive thing like him proposing to Ryland. And at that point in time, ultimately that shift in attention did work in his favour, but during this podcast he'd exposed that this engagement was already planned prior to him getting cancelled. For those who don't know, he'd gotten cancelled for the cat scandal. He'd explained that him getting cancelled was a really poor timing at that point in his life. So let's briefly touch on that scandal and what exactly happened. Right before Shane got engaged, one of his old podcasts went viral on Twitter after someone posted this shocking clip.
One time, I laid my cat down on her back.
Are you gonna get arrested for this?
I don't know. No.
Think about it.
I don't think so.
Okay, go ahead.
I laid the cat down on her back and then I moved her little chicken legs like.
At this point in time, Shane was enraged that this scandal ruined his engagement. He'd also posted an apology to Twitter that has since become a meme. I didn't F my cat. I didn't on my cat. I didn't put my anywhere near my cat. I've never done anything weird with my cats. I promised myself I wasn't going to make apology videos after last year's thing, so I'm just trying to be as short and honest with this as possible. I've apologized many times for all the dumb shit I've said in videos and podcasts over the years. I've learned my lessons over and over again, and I'm more confident now in my ability to be entertaining by just being myself and not being so shocking for laughs. That story was fake and was based on a dumb, awful sketch idea I had years ago that I never made, thank God. And when the opportunity came up for a funny moment in the podcast, I told it as if it was a real story, which was disgusting and very dumb. My goal with the podcast and with my videos years ago was to tell shocking stories that would make people laugh and scream, OMG, no you didn't, and think I was so crazy. It's embarrassing and I effing hate myself for it. Now that I'm making stuff I love and I'm being myself, it feels so much better, and I finally feel like I'm putting stuff out into the world that means something. I'm not saying I hate everything I've made over the years. There's so many things I'm proud of, but all of my offensive jokes, over the top stories and insensitive jokes are something that still haunt me and something I have to be faced with every day on the internet, and it never gets easier. So I'm sorry for what I said about my cat. I'm sorry for what I said about anything or anyone that was offensive, and I'm sorry for being someone who thought being super offensive and shocking all the time was funny. I'm sorry for my past, but I'm ready to make it right, and I feel like without my past I wouldn't be who I am today, and I wouldn't be able to grow and spend my energy on things that actually mean something. This has been the best 2 years of my life, and it's because I've been able to drop the act and be myself, and I'm sorry for not doing it sooner. So going back to Shane's recent interview with Perez Hilton, Shane also touched on his relationship with Ryland at the time that Shane got cancelled, and Shane just basically said that he was in a rut for like a couple years, which would have definitely been hard on their relationship. He said right before he got cancelled, well, around the time his palette came out, he'd apparently told Ryland that that was it and he was quitting YouTube, which is kind of shocking now if you think about it, because Shane was on top of the YouTube world at that point in time, so why would he want to quit? The answer to that was burnout and stress. From the outside, we were all looking in like, wow, Shane had this amazing life, but Shane was going through it. Shane also exposed that he doesn't want to get married anytime soon, but Ryland does, and he was making up all these excuses to not have a wedding, and this is like a huge thing that he's been exposed for, because for years people have called Shane out on this. Ryland wants to get married so bad and Shane is just not keen at all. Perez even brought up the idea of an elopement, and Shane was still not keen on the idea, which sucks for Ryland. Everyone's been saying for the longest time how Ryland low-key gets treated like shit by Shane, and it's really sad. It kind of looks like Ryland's getting dragged along at this point, so I find it very interesting that Shane was so, like, you could even tell by his tone in this podcast that he was just not liking the idea of a wedding and kept mentioning how they were putting it off. Shane's day in the life now is a whole lot different to what it used to be like. He currently doesn't have any hobbies, he stays at home all the time. whereas Ryland is very active and always out and about walking the dogs. Shane also discussed his finances and said that he doesn't understand investments and he's not really driven by money, so he doesn't make decisions based on money. So by the sounds of things, he's probably in a very stagnant place at the moment, but he doesn't seem to mind. Lastly, Shane briefly mentioned his and Jeffree Star's relationship. Jeffree stood by Shane throughout Shane's cancellation. However, they didn't really hang out publicly and still don't to this day. Shane said that during his cancellation, he came to a realization that people handle situations out of fear. He'd also discussed his relationships with people that fizzled out because Shane lost a lot of friends around the time he got cancelled. And one of the most shocking things Shane experienced through that time was a friend who he didn't name that had sent him a DM saying that they might have to put a statement out to protect their career. Shane said that he didn't really understand this because he himself is such a good friend to people and sticks with them to the ground, and so he never thought people close to him would do that to him. Overall, Perez Hilton's interview with Shane provided fans with a deep dive into Shane's perspective on his cancellation. It was definitely eye-opening because that was like the most shocking scandal of its time. Shane, the god of YouTube, cancelled, and now he's living in Colorado, starting a family, living in the woods, just like Jeffree Star, not much different. So what are your guys' thoughts on Shane Dawson now? Let me know in the comments.